Good afternoon. Welcome to the May 30th Regional Planning Committee meeting. Before I move forward, I would like to ask our interpreter how to access interpretation.
Good afternoon. Announcement from an interpreter. To use the interpretation feature, please go to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are. Click on interpretation icon, world, and select English as your language. If you're joining through the Zoom mobile app, cell phone, laptop, etc., please press ellipsis, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on mute original audio to not hear the original Spanish low in the background. Headsets are available for interpretation. If you're in the meeting room, please check out a headset from the receptionist in the lobby. Aviso por parte del intérprete. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, favor desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, globo terráqueo, y seleccione Spanish, español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom, celular, tableta, presione los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio. Contamos con auriculares disponibles para el servicio de interpretación. Si se encuentra en la sala de reunión, favor de pedir auriculares con la recepcionista en el vestíbulo. Gracias. Thank you.
I would like to ask our clerk, Ms. Francesca Webb, to confirm that we have quorum.
Thank you, Chair. We do have a quorum today and all of our voting jurisdictions are represented. We also have one member that is participating virtually, so I do need to confirm some information with Councilmember Koval on the record. Councilmember Koval, if you could please state, without disclosing any medical information, the reason for your remote participation today.
I have a medical reason.
Thank you very much. And could you also let us know if there's anybody over the age of 18 in the room with you, and if so, disclose their relationship to you?
There is not.
Thank you. And can you also confirm that you're able to leave your camera on for the duration of the meeting?
Yes, I am.
Thank you so much. Chair, back to you.
Thank you. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we call home. The tribal nations of San Diego region have historically faced injustices. We acknowledge the harmony that existed between the land, nature, and its original peoples who have since endured displacement, persecution, and systemic oppression. We pay our respect to the unceded territory and homelands of the 18 tribal nations in our region, the most in any county in the United States, from 4 cultural groups: the Kumeyaay, the Diagueña, the Luisanyo, the Kupeña, and the Cahuilla. This land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the SANDAG community, we acknowledge this legacy. We aspire to learn from Indigenous traditional knowledge and experiences in undoing the injustices of the past. I will now call the meeting to order. Before I do the pledge, I will let everybody know I will not be able to see on my screen who wants to speak. Unfortunately, it doesn't work for anything but the board meetings. So I'm going to ask everybody around the table. I'll have people looking. I do not want to get the order wrong, and I'm not ignoring anybody. So please make your desire to speak known, and please help me out. So if you see somebody over here that I have not visually said it, before you start speaking, if somebody's been waiting, would you just let me know so we can all be heard when we want to? I want to make sure everybody feels listened to. With that, would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. On to item number 1, non-agenda public and member comments. Per our board policy, the amount of time allowed for each verbal public comment is determined based on the number of agenda items, the complexity of those items, and the number of persons anticipated to offer comment. This allows us to hear from as many people as possible and to complete our business while we still have a quorum. Based on those factors, for today's meeting, each member of the public will be allowed 2 minutes for their comment. Francesca, do we have any members of the public that wish to speak?
Thank you, Chair. We have 4 public comments. We'll start with Purita Javier, followed by Cesar Javier.
Members of the public shall have the opportunity to address the Regional Planning Committee on any issues within the jurisdiction of the Regional Planning Commission, Regional Planning Committee that is not on this agenda. Public
Hello.
speakers are limited to 2 minutes or less per person. Are we ready for speaker number one?
Hi. My name is Barita. This is May 24, 2022. Cesar Javier, 5232 Streamview Drive, San Diego, California, 92105. Dear Cesar, thank you for reaching out to my office regarding your continued concerns over the air quality in your neighborhood. We will be reaching out to the County of San Diego Air Pollution Control District as soon as we have an update. Your community representative, Ben Mendoza, will follow up with you. If the problem continues, please do not hesitate to contact Ben Mendoza at B. Mendoza, San Diego, GOV, or 619-510-6896. If you have any additional concerns or questions, please do not hesitate to contact us again. The District 9 team and I are committed to the highest standard of constituent service and will continue working to provide you with the city you and all San Diegans reserve. Sincerely, Sean Elo Rivera, Councilman, Member, District 9.
Cesar Javier, the husband, also a victim of this toxicity. We reach out practically all levels, political, judiciary, if I may say that, the attorney's office, and the chief executive of the city, Mayor Gloria, who happens to be members of the governing board member of the Air Pollution Control District. We reached out also Sacramento IPA, which advised us to plant more trees and put a huge electric fan towards the downwind from that kiln or oven, ceramics oven. We reached out also the federal level, and this is what the email says. July 11, 2023, 8:12 a.m. Thank you for the detailed information and site history. This has been shared with our air enforcement manager, who will likely coordinate with the local air quality control board, meaning the Air Pollution Control District leadership, for the options and further investigation. As you noted, the alleged violation fall primarily at the local level. Zoning, please listen, Councilor Lee. This is your turf, being the chair of the land use, please. Zoning, nuisance, etc. So hopefully your code enforcement case can address those concerns. Imagine, there is already a national advice and nobody seems to care to respond to our issue. 74 of the residents are supportive of a petition to await the home business mom chair. I heard your authoritative voice. That's the kind of leadership. Seriously.
Thank you very much. Your time has expired. Our next speaker will be allegedly Audra, followed by Truth.
So it seems like we're planning ourselves into a disaster with all of the things that you guys are, putting forward. And there is no seeming plans to, mitigate fire risks and things that are potential hazards due to the way that you guys are planning, the way that people get around or their lack thereof. And it is very dangerous to be making all of these plans without, in the meantime of you planning them, making sure that you aren't putting people in harm's way by putting in roundabouts or different things in the communities here in San Diego. It's very disturbing, the fact that nothing has really come forward as far as the plan goes to evacuate in the event of a disaster that could potentially happen. It doesn't even have to just be a fire. It could be, more flooding, different things. I mean, when they're, manipulating the weather, it's allowing you guys to use the excuse that it is climate change, but this is cloud seeding, and there's chemtrails that are used to and many other things to direct weather, to make things happen. And if we don't acknowledge these types of things, then you're always going to use the excuse that it's the climate changing, and it fits into your narrative to then basically control everything about the people, especially our movements. And if you're not going to make sure that we're not being put at risk due to your planning, then you are going to set yourselves up not only for more lawsuits, but for potentially people to lose their lives because you're refusing to do what is necessary to make sure there is a plan in place. I mean, every community should be holding some kind of community town hall or some kind of forum that lets everybody in the community know that even if there isn't an app that you can use because maybe your phone isn't going to work, that you know exactly what to do and make sure that you guys aren't making it harder for us to do that.
Thank you. Our final speaker will be Truth.
Did Laura say the pledge? Because I didn't see it. If I'm going to be here all day, I'm going to have to start ordering pizzas and get them delivered here. So instead, I had to rush to go get a spicy falafel hummus wrap. That's good, but still. The Regional Planning Committee is supposed to provide oversight of the regional comprehensive plan that addresses inter-regional issues with surrounding counties and Mexico. That includes environment and infrastructure needs. So what is this committee's plan for dealing with the environmental issues being caused to this county by Mexico? Are you planning for infrastructure to send their toxic sewage back to them? Are you planning that all border crossings only allow California emission standards compliant cars and trucks through? Has there been any plan to address the increased development in Tijuana directly linked to that crossing? Maybe AB 914, giving CARB say over indirect sources of toxic air contamination, is going to have a change. We never got to topics for discussion at future meetings, so add that to my ideas, along with a discussion about censuring board members who no-show meetings, for example. Tara Loss of Reason, who's never attended any committee meeting she's assigned to. A discussion about genuine outreach to every city that includes surveys to transit users, highway users, and sidewalk users, asking them what exactly needs improvement and what has not been working by SANDAG. A transparent discussion about what managed lanes consist of and about their negative impacts to traffic congestion. A discussion about the fire dangers of EVs, toxic lithium fumes, and toxic lithium waste. Because last meeting, Carrie bragged about Coronado wasting money on an EV fire truck. She did not find the irony in firefighters working in the type of vehicle that is subject to lithium fires. It was also rude to brag about something that most cities can't afford to buy. Luckily, it's toxic junk. Most people don't even want it. So Carrie, how about a discussion about the issue of rounds and how much it costs to be able to afford a second one? And sorry, I did not bring a poem for you guys today. However, I did write one the other day inspired by politics and Memorial Day. It's called The Season of Humbleness, because it really goes together. When you don't know what Memorial Day is about, and then you have the politicians that don't know what they're doing, it's all about them. It goes together, actually. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 2 online commenters that raised their hands shortly after we started. Phone number ending in 672, and you'll be followed by Marco Espinoza.
Thank you, Francesca Consuelo. I just wanted to point out how same thing as I said earlier in today's meeting for my non-agenda, how the UN's Agenda 21 sounds like sustainability plans but many critics warn they may lead to tighter government control over our lives. A major part of this vision is the 15-minute city, where everything you need is within a 15-minute walk or bike ride. Hence all these silly bike lanes that no one is using, which they will eventually be forced to use. So much for the disabled people. On the surface, it promotes convenience and reduced emissions, but we will argue, opponents argue, it could lead to a digital surveillance, which it already has, restricted travel, and loss of property rights, all in the name of climate action. These policies may start as voluntary, but could become mandatory. They're not going to be voluntary, and they will be imposed. It's important to ask, are we empowered or managed? The real danger lies not in walkable neighborhoods, but in centralized control that limits freedom and choice under the guise of sustainability. Thank you. That's all I got.
Thank you. And our final speaker on this item will be Marco Espinosa. You can go ahead.
Hello, good afternoon, Marco Espinosa. Hello to the members of the committee. This is my first time tuning into this committee meeting, and I just want to say hello, and I look forward to the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the public commenters.
Antoinette, are there any SANDAG updates you'd like to share?
Yes, I have a few. Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome to your first Regional Planning Committee meeting in our new boardroom. We have been very busy during the month of May. I'll start with this week's activities. We went to Sacramento, a few of us, with the chair, and a big focus of that meeting was the May revise and ensuring that transportation funding and housing funding were secured in the state budget. We also talked about Senate Bill 375 reform, a topic that we've been discussing with the board and a big topic at the board retreat, as well as elevating the board's position on housing and RENA. We met with the FRA regional administrator to talk about the status of some of our outstanding federal grants, and those conversations went well, and I think all signs indicate that we are on track to obligate by October, so that's good news. We gave updates to the Lieutenant Governor's office on the status of the Otay Mesa East and Los San project, and we signed an MOU with High Speed Rail to continue the conversations that we've been having with them to serve as the NEPA lead for the Los San Rail realignment project. And then speaking of housing, you're going to have an item on that today, but we also recently signed agreements with the Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association to provide them with $4.4 million in funding to plan and build housing, and that was part of the state REAP funding that we received. Other important activities that have happened this week. Last night we had the scoping meeting for the Del Mar realignment. The NOP is out. We're taking comments until June 30th. Well attended, very good meeting. Got a lot of feedback from community members, and if you can help us get the word out about that, we would appreciate it. We also released the draft 2025 regional plan last Friday. That is out for public comment until July 18th. We'll be doing a lot of outreach around the region. We have events in each of the subregions, and then of course we're happy to come to your council meetings, other community group meetings. Just let us know. We're starting to book those out and get out and about to share information with folks on the plan. And then last but not least, Caltrans released the EIR for the 1578 connector. So that's the managed lanes connector. It also adds about 3 miles of managed lanes on State Route 78. And that environmental document is out for comment until July 3rd. So a lot of things to review and provide public comment on between now and end of June and early July. And that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments from the committee members? Seeing none, we'll move to the consent agenda. Francesca, do we have any public comments on the consent agenda?
Thank you, Chair. We do. We have 3 comments on consent. We'll start with Cesar Javier and then allegedly Audra.
Cesar, Cesar Javier, we take this opportunity to hand to you our faith and belief. Minutes are benchmark. We call in surveying as back azimuth. From this platform, we could go forward to where the right path is directed. This is also a testimony, the product of toil and think tank of efforts of SANDAG's thinkers. We also remembered, witness, revere the good, better, best in our effort, particularly on mobility circulation. Thank you, SANDAG. But I could only reconcile this with the core city, being SANDAG as a show window for 1.4 residents of San Diego City. Councilor Lee, please listen, because this is how it should go, based on the minutes, based on this patrimony, so we will be able to pick the right path in planning and implementation of the 4 elements in urban planning: shell, man, his shelter, and our society. Without your corresponding reciprocity as what SANDAG is doing, we are a failure, I tell you, as we consider it now as a crisis. Thank you, SANDAG.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be allegedly Audra, followed by Consuelo.
All right, so with your planning that you're doing, this kind of piggybacks off what I was saying before. When you're making these plans, you're not like of course, we have a public safety committee and different things like that. But whenever you're implementing something, you should be, looking at the risks and benefits of it. And many times, I think you guys just push what you think is a benefit of it, and you don't really look into like the infrastructure that you're trying to bring forward for your climate action plan. That is actually not only detrimental to the environment and the planet, but also the human species. And actually, I don't like using that word. It means monster. Anywho, got to rewrite our brains in the way that you guys and people want us to think. But, when you have things in place like mitigation tactics could be that you pay more money in order to say, I'm going to have a very significant carbon footprint, but as long as I give you money, it's okay. That's a problem, because if you really wanted to, do things that were going to mitigate this stuff, you wouldn't take money in exchange for that. And if you really want to be planning to have San Diego have cleaner air, then you need to think about what Mexico's contribution is to the air quality that we find ourselves in. Obviously in South Bay, it's extremely bad. And that's not just from people in San Diego. So instead of, trying to hold Mexico accountable, you guys just care about the commerce coming through. Well, you could get more money if you charged a fee, especially when there is no smog that is anything like nothing like that there. So their air quality is going to be bad every time you're having these people cross the border. So don't blame the people that actually live here and punish us for that, when you could actually mitigate it in the process of them coming over. And also just the electric infrastructure, that is detrimental to doing what you're claiming that you're going to do. So figure it out.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Consuelo, followed by Paul the Bold, and Paul will be our final speaker.
Okay, Consuelo here. So you call this planning, but what you're really building is control. Good planning should serve the people, not monitor, manage, or marginalize them. If your vision of the future requires surveillance, restrictions, and unelected power, that's not planning, that's programming. And I'm not against planning. I'm not against central planning. No, I'm against central planning that ignores the will of the people pretending to serve them. And, SANDAG talks about climate inequity, but behind the slogans are systems of control, 24/7 monitoring, restricted movement, and a future where freedom is rebranded as a threat. Let's see, the push for smart cities, digital IDs, 24-hour surveillance. It's not about efficiency, it's about enforcement, it's about control. A truly free and resilient community isn't built on tracking and restrictions. It's built on trust, local voices, and voluntary cooperation. How can we trust a committee that designs infrastructure around data collection, not human freedom? Please answer that question. And if this committee is serious about planning for people, not just policies, then it's time to put transparency, consent, and individual rights back on the blueprint. I'm done.
Thank you. Our final speaker will be Paul the Bold. You can go ahead.
Hello. I like to go back to real basics. First, I notice on the list of representatives, each county is represented by La Mesa and Santee. Santee is kind of close to East County, but not, I'd say it's more like Central County. La Mesa, I don't know if I'd even consider that Central County. It's pretty coastal. I mean, it's like a suburb of San Diego. So, you know, it's another reason for seconding the talk of Rebecca Jones, among others, for having a voting representative for what is truly East County, you know, the regions of Alpine and east of there. And also for having a few voting representatives for the Native Indigenous American tribes, which, you know, these people all suffer or whatever from your plans, mostly suffer, I think. And it would help them recover actually if they did have a voting representative. Also, I mean, your plans are kind of silly. You're just adding another bureaucracy to the people who are already working on this, and it's not necessarily helpful. Just please mute.
Thank you. Your time has expired. That concludes the public comments, Chair.
Does anybody on the committee have any comments or questions on the consent agenda? Seeing none, may I have a motion to recommend the consent agenda? It should be noted that a member's absence from the meeting for which minutes are being approved does not prevent the member from participating in their correction or approval. Do I have a motion? Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll move approval.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Chair, since we have a member participating virtually today, we do have to do a roll call vote in addition to the clickers.
Okay.
So I'll go ahead and start that. For the City of San Diego, Councilmember Lee.
Yes.
For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Anderson. For East County, Councilmember Koval.
Yes.
For North County Coastal, Mayor Ehlers.
Yes.
For North County Inland, Mayor White.
Yes.
And for South County, Chair Downey.
Yes.
That motion passes unanimously. If you could still use your clickers as well so that we can record, we can correct it after the fact. That's okay.
Oh, all right. Moving on to reports. Okay. 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 Okay, that's what I thought. Okay. Moving on to reports. Item number 3, Jacob Armstrong and Mark Slovic from the County of San Diego, Stephen Cook from Intersecting Metrics, and Kristen Uchetl from SANDAG will present on the evaluation of options for a regional VMT program.
I'm going to go ahead and just give a little bit of background on this item. So a couple of years ago, the County of San Diego asked SANDAG to partner on a Caltrans planning grant application to fund a study that would explore options for a regional program that could mitigate VMT under CEQA. We were awarded the grant, and the county has been taking the lead on this project with support from SANDAG. But as I think you probably all know, mitigating VMT from development projects under SB 743 has been very challenging for developments, and particularly for small jurisdictions and rural communities that don't have a lot of options for mitigating. So we've been hearing, I'm sure you have, about agencies across the state implementing VMT mitigation banks and programs that allow them to contribute to VMT reducing projects perhaps elsewhere in the region. So the team has been exploring different options for a VMT mitigation program that could be considered by jurisdictions in our region. The county is going to be sharing the results of the work today. They've been working with a technical advisory committee that's made up from staff from some of your jurisdictions. And so we look forward to a discussion about what you think of this work.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Kirsten Yucatel, and I am the SANDAG project manager for this project. It is being led primarily by the county with support from Stephen Cook at Intersecting Metrics. So I'm going to turn it over to Jacob and Steve.
I'll just introduce myself real quick. My name is Jacob Armstrong. I'm the Chief of Land Development at the county in the Planning Development Services branch. With that, I'll hand it over to our consultant, Steve.
And I'm Stephen Cook with Intersecting Metrics. Can you hand me the clicker? Thank you. So just a little bit of history on the grant. Antoinette did a great job covering it, but just a little bit more detail. This is a Caltrans Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant. It was a partnership grant between the County of San Diego and SANDAG. The total grant amount was for $480,000 with $137,000 in-kind matching funds, which is basically staff time from both the county and SANDAG. The grant needs to be completed by the end of next fiscal year, so June 30th, 2026. Once again, as Antoinette mentioned, there are several jurisdictions throughout the state looking at similar programs. SB 743 came into effect on July 1st, 2020. And that's the legislation that moved transportation engineering from looking at level of service and roadway operations for impacts to VMT. So this is a really new thing for our industry, and we're really starting to grapple how we can mitigate the impacts. It's not as simple as spot treatments at intersections. It takes a much more holistic approach, which is why you're starting to see more programmatic mitigation programs like what we're looking at here today. There are three programs that we know have been adopted, two of which were within the San Diego region, the first being the City of San Diego's Active Transportation and Loop Fee program that was adopted in 2021. And then last year, the City of Escondido adopted a VMT exchange program. And finally, last year, LA Metro implemented a mitigation banking program. So these are the project goals that are within the grant. I apologize for all the text on the page, but really what it comes down to, the first goal is to really use regional assets and to leverage VMT mitigation at a local level. VMT is much more effective to be mitigated at a regional level and using regional resources. And that's really the target of this program, is how as a region can we come together and reduce VMT. The second one is to really provide an understanding of what the cost to reduce VMT is. That's really one of the bigger hurdles that local jurisdictions have faced when trying to do VMT mitigation programs, really quantifying how much VMT would be reduced through infrastructure, how much that infrastructure can cost, and how much of that cost can be put onto developments that have VMT impacts. The third goal is to really prioritize treatments within disadvantaged areas. That's kind of been a push that we've all had over the last 5 to 10 years, is really making up and providing good infrastructure within disadvantaged communities and prioritizing infrastructure there. The fourth goal is to create a sustainable living environment for the city or for the region. And that's really reducing VMT, and that's directly related to reducing GHG and providing better air quality and greenhouse gas emissions. And then finally, the last goal is to support the implementation of the 2021 RTP, and that would really move on to the 2025 RTP once that gets adopted. This is the scope of work in the grant. I'm going to breeze through this slide pretty quickly because we have more detailed slides on the kind of the process that we went to, but we put this in there just to show what the scope of work is. The first is to develop a technical advisory committee. The next is to really establish evaluation criteria and a framework of the program, something that we can start to build from. Then is to develop several program options so that we can look at the different options that are out there and really get an understanding of all the assets that are available to us. Finally, we put that back through the regional or the evaluation criteria to select a preferred program and then build the preferred program from there. So a couple of misconceptions that we've heard along the way. So these are things we did want to clear up a little bit. This is not the roadway user charge. This has nothing to do with roadway user charge. This wouldn't be something for, this wouldn't be a tax on individual citizens for driving. This is strictly mitigation for development. So this is not the roadway user charge. The program will not be mandatory. It's completely voluntary for all jurisdictions to participate in. SANDAG does have a history of this. SANDAG over time, they developed trip generation rates that all the jurisdictions use. They're not required to use it, but it's a resource for jurisdictions to use. They used to have transportation study guidelines that different jurisdictions could use and implement so they didn't have to develop their own, but it wasn't a requirement. This is kind of in that same vein. This is a resource that SANDAG and the county will develop that basically all the jurisdictions would have the opportunity to use, but there wouldn't be required to. The program will not allow developments to move forward without doing a VMT analysis. This is very similar to mitigation banking with other environmental disciplines where it could be used for mitigation, but you still have to do the analysis. You still have to identify the impact, and then you'd have the opportunity to use the program to mitigate that impact. But you'd still go through that entire CEQA process. You'd still disclose the impacts, and then you disclose that this would be the mitigation for those impacts. And then finally, this will not require jurisdictions to change their transportation study guidelines. This is something that they could use to enhance their guidelines or in conjunction with them, but this would not require any jurisdiction to change their transportation guidelines or standards. So that's really kind of the basis of the grant. So now we'll kind of get into what is VMT mitigation and how do we start to tackle it. So there's really 3 different types of VMT mitigation programs out there. There's a lot of variations of each one, but they can all kind of fit within these 3 buckets. So the first one is an in lieu fee program. This is similar to the City of San Diego's Active Transportation in Lieu Fee program. And this is where projects that have VMT mitigation impacts, they provide funding or a fee to a local jurisdiction. And then the local jurisdiction builds infrastructure that reduces VMT, multimodal infrastructure, sidewalks, bike lanes, things like that, to basically reduce existing VMT. And then that reduction in VMT offsets the impacts of basically the development that had the impact. The second example is a mitigation bank program. This is similar to what LA Metro is doing. So in this case, jurisdictions, you build VMT reducing infrastructure all the time. You build sidewalks, you build bike lanes, but you don't get credit for it. And so as jurisdiction builds these types of infrastructure and basically reduce VMT on their own, they can take credit for that and they can hold that credit and then sell that credit to development. So if a city builds a bike lane and that bike lane reduces VMT by 200 miles a day, the jurisdiction can hold that credit and then sell those 200 miles of reduction to help offset the impacts of future development. And finally, there's the VMT exchange program. This is where a project in location A has a VMT related impact, but they may not be able to mitigate that impact on site, whether it's because the project just isn't appropriate to it, or there's not the proper infrastructure around them to build VMT reducing infrastructure. So what they would do is they work with other jurisdictions or other parts of their own jurisdiction to identify CIP projects for VMT reducing infrastructure. The development in turn builds that infrastructure off-site and gets the credit for that VMT reduction to ultimately offset their impact. We're not limited to using just one of these types of programs. You can blend them together and you can have multiple layers to your program to create a hybrid program, which really opens up a lot of opportunity for development to maybe find the right mitigation for themselves or for the jurisdiction to really be able to implement the right infrastructure with a variety of different funding types. So this is kind of the process that we took, and this is where, when I was in the scoping one, what I was referring to. So what we did is we started with a high level program options. We kind of threw everything at the wall to see what would stick. There was kind of no bad ideas at that point. We ran those ideas through the program evaluation criteria and filtered the ideas down to 3 or 4 program types. With those 3 to 4 program types, we ran that through the technical advisory committee, and once again ran that back through the evaluation criteria to basically reduce that down to 1 project option, which is where we're at today. And now that we have the preferred program option, we're going to actually build the program, conduct a nexus study. And a nexus study is basically, it takes the apportionment of the burden of the infrastructure and applies that to the impacts to really create a fair cost for development, what the jurisdictions can actually charge to development through the fee programs. And then we'll come back to everybody to get the program approved. So as I mentioned, the technical advisory committee, as Antoinette mentioned, actually, this is made up of staff members from all the jurisdictions, the city traffic engineers and or the city planners. We meet 6 times overall. We've met 4 times to this point to really start to bounce ideas off of them at first, then to kind of hone the ideas and get feedback, and then finally to peer review some of the documents. And then once we actually build the program, we'll go back to the TAC and actually get feedback and comments on the program, and then finalize the program through them. The process in developing the actual programs. So as I mentioned before, we started with just a ton of ideas. There's kind of no bad ideas, just ideas floating all over from what other jurisdictions have done, what experts have told us, and even kind of like white paper theory stuff. We looked at a bunch of different ideas, and we took those ideas and we combined them together into different program types. And so, as I mentioned before, there can be kind of a hybrid program where you're looking at multiple ideas and you put them together to kind of create a completed program. So once we developed the high program options, the TAC voted on the top 4 to move forward. And then from there, we conducted a high level analysis or a planning level analysis and put the ideas back through the evaluation criteria to select the preferred alternative. The preferred alternative we developed was to basically develop guidelines and do the math for local jurisdictions to be able to implement their own local fee program. That was important because that gives jurisdictions the control on how they collect funds for VMT related impacts, and then also how they allocate those funds. But recognizing that not all jurisdictions have that ability because some might be too rural or too small. So we actually developed regional programs as well to provide additional cover. So one would be to develop a regional credit program where jurisdictions throughout the region could submit VMT reducing infrastructure in which they built, gain credit for the VMT infrastructure, the VMT reduced through that infrastructure, and then they could use that credit to sell to future development with impacts, and then use the revenues from those sales to basically build more infrastructure. And then finally, a regional exchange program. So what this would be is a program or a database where jurisdictions could submit CIP projects or shovel-ready projects that would reduce VMT, and the development community could research this database and find projects in which they could build to help offset their VMT-related impacts. So the next steps, as I mentioned, we just selected the preferred program. That's why we're here today, is to gain feedback on it. So it's a perfect timing if you guys have thoughts or comments. We can still incorporate that within any of the programs that we develop. Develop the program level nexus study, review the draft program with the TAC, and then finalize the program. And then our schedule, we started this back in June 2024. We're currently at the 4th TAC meeting, the first PAC meeting, which is what this is. And then we're planning to get the draft program out by October 2025, and then have the program completed by really June 30th, 2026. And that's what we have.
Thank you very much. Francesca, do we have any public comments?
Thank you, Chair. We do have public comment. Have 6 commenters. We'll start with Jeffrey Huter. If you'd like to come up to the podium, and Jeffrey has some media he'd like to share. So we're going to go ahead and allow him to log in on Zoom so that he can share that as well. Jeff, unfortunately, we can't show the timer at the same time that your media is up, so I'll just let you know when your time is expired.
Make a quick comment today. I think one of the steps that we often miss in all this planning and all this modeling is, do the outputs of our models make sense, right? A lot of, we have this whole ABM 2+. It's a very complicated set of machinery. And as the public, and I'm a PhD in physics, I ran a data science company, but to me, what you really want to do is look at the output and say, does it make sense? And this is a perfect example of where it doesn't. So San Diego uses the outputs of this model to build what it calls its village propensity map. And what I just want to point out is two places where it makes no sense whatsoever. First is in Mid-City. Mid-City is actually the poorest part of San Diego. And it has a lot of transit because it did back in the 40s when everybody worked at Convair. That doesn't happen anymore. Has poor performing schools and no job centers, and yet San Diego is saying that's where all the housing should go in San Diego, and instead of the fact that everybody in this area commutes north during the day to their regular jobs. Conversely, if you look at Mira Mesa, that's the heart of San Diego's economy, and yet we're saying that's not where we should be putting housing, where in fact we have the best jobs in San Diego. We have very high quality transit, and there's plenty of shopping and other amenities there. So I just think we need a little more public review in the models. There's a lot of process here, but sometimes you need to take a step back and make sure you got the answers right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Cesar Javier, followed by allegedly Audra.
Cesar Javier, how could the public, especially the less, to understand this conceptual presentation? To my understanding, it is a clear indication that you would like to decongest, meaning save time, perhaps, and not to waste fuel if we are talking about mobility. Perhaps you're thinking of investing money as an incentive. Hey, you think. We give you this money in the bank, and once you implement the project, you will receive some kind of return. Looks like that. Can we not simplify this to the lowest term that we could understand? Well, because, you know, 1.4 million San Diegans, core city, and you want to ensure that time consumed in traveling be shortened, or probably make some shortcut, environmental sake, what else? Safety sake. Do you perceive a cable car on top? Or do you conceive a fast-moving ferry along the sea board? Or perhaps another circumferential road on eastern board of the region? Let's simplify it so we could probably give more rational inputs, sir. And thank you, by the way. It enlightens the need of simplification, which is one of the character of public delivery of goods. Simple.
Thank you. Your
Timely,
time has
efficient.
expired. Our next speaker will be allegedly Audra, followed by Truth.
You guys in your propaganda, it's so funny, vehicle miles travel, like very minimal travel plan. How about that? Or just, mitigating the freedom of the people. Because this has nothing to do with like saving the planet. And, you think that if you build homes, affordable housing by transit, that you're going to mitigate vehicle miles travel, like people are all of a sudden just not going to drive. We can tell that that's not happening. The only way you guys are going to really implement this and stop vehicle miles traveled is by going ahead and ripping the Band-Aid off and getting us out of our cars, which is the plan, right? Or bringing in the fee to be like, you can't go anywhere. I mean, you guys do things that don't make any sense. but you get paid a lot of money to bring forward these reports when even the county of San Diego is saying the vehicle miles travel data isn't even something that can be used as a metric. But yet you guys continue to do it. This is the racket of the VMT, because if you're like, I was just bringing up a non-agenda, it's like you're willing to accept money to mitigate something. And that just shows that it's all BS. It's like when you guys talk about we have to conserve our water, yet we let 50% of it go out when it's traveling from one reservoir to another. If there was a real problem, you wouldn't allow that to happen. You wouldn't be like, have 1 cup of water left and pour half of it out. So, I mean, the things that you guys do is just, it's ridiculous. I mean, and you think that because you build bike lanes and had more sidewalks, that somehow that's going to reduce VMTs. Just because you build it. People actually have to use it for you to do that. And people still want to travel in their cars. Like if I have to come from North County down here, like there is not infrastructure for people to just travel that way. And it's just, it's rather ridiculous that we sit here and we talk about these things when it's literally about controlling the movements of the people, and that's it, period. And that's what you're set out to do. And you need to be honest with the people.
I think our next speaker will be Truth, followed by Paul the Bold on Zoom.
It's not a required tax, it's voluntary, right up until the state mandates it, right? How ironic that the rigged, unlawful VMT became effective during 2020 when the brainwashed people were not driving. SB 743 was introduced by Senator Darrell Steinberg, who also wanted racist reparations. A VMT exchange program which can be used for backroom deals, a VMT credit program where guaranteed credits owned by corporate stack and pack developers can be sold, and money mitigations to increase prices on single family homes are all tax scams that are going to ruin this state more. And it's basically SANDAG or the city, whoever, would collect a check for doing absolutely nothing. And then we'd have nothing to show for it. You're just going to have more bike lanes no one's going to use. And it's VMT is allegedly about health, not control, right? Well, why are the credits on health going to be bought and sold? For an essential nexus between mitigation measures and new development, the potential 45 lanes of polluting commercial trucks at the OME crossing is going to be adding GHGs to the regional plan numbers. So Mexico should be paying America VMT fees as development mitigation via that 50% of our toll revenue. And if unlawful equity is going to continue, then Imperial Beach and Coronado should have all fees waived until 100% of their tourism development is restored. And VMT reducing infrastructure, I'm assuming that's dangerous bike lanes that cost $10 million a mile, because page 36 lies when it says bike lanes are averaging $85,000 a mile. Not by SANDAG, they're not. Well, page 44 claims that reducing car travel costs only $24,700. No specifics on how. Can anybody explain how showers reduce VMT? Is that for the sweaty bicyclist? You know what would actually reduce VMT? Make public transit safe again. Implement a Vision Zero. Will the TAC include private individuals or only public officials? Who owns the project website? Are VMT taxes a California value? Did they reduce VMT for all the illegals they bust into our country? Has anyone in public office given up airplane travel yet? No, because this is all a control game. And for the record, Mayor Mesa already has a plan for increased density. Meanwhile, the roads are crumbling.
I think our next speaker will be Paul the Bold, followed by Consuelo.
Okay. Paul the Bold. I prefer option. Oh, none of them. I say you're using a lot of metrics, very impersonal, and it's not always logical to us. Or making sense. And SANDAG also uses some very old data. I've noted data up to 8 years old. So that's kind of a, their plans are probably BS to begin with. The guy, I mean, I don't know why you need an outside presenter. SANDAG should be able to absorb these lessons and present them in a better manner that we can understand. For one thing, VMT is all part of decarb, and the Earth by itself has done a very good job of warming and cooling periodically for millions of billions of years. So, it's like, how is a bit of carbon going to really change things dramatically? I mean, things like the Earth wobbling on its core, the magnetic poles shifting, those are going to do big things. I mean, let's see. Another thing is, the presenter claims this isn't an RUC, not a tax. You want to go, you pay. And it discriminates against disadvantaged people who can't afford EVs. So, this needs to be rethought.
Thank you. Our final speaker will be Consuelo. You can go ahead.
Okay, Consuelo here. So yeah, let's be clear, this isn't about environment anymore. This is about control. VMT fees and mitigation strategies are being packaged as solutions to climate change. But in truth, they are penalties on freedom of movement. They punish people for driving, even when driving is the only practical option, especially in underserved communities. This is part of a shift from public service to behavioral enforcement. Quietly, the region is being reshaped into something less about community and more about compliance. When you start charging people for how far they drive, you're not only solving a problem, you're engineering a behavior. What we're witnessing is a shift from public service to behavioral enforcement. Quietly, we're being asked to accept a future where every mile is measured, priced, and eventually restricted. That's not sustainability. That's surveillance with the little star on it. And here's a deeper truth. This won't stop with driving. BMT is a part of a broader framework of digital IDs, smart cities, and 24/7 data monitoring. It's not a conspiracy. It's all written in the fine print. The more we trade personal choice for centralized planning, the more we lose what makes us free. Now is the moment to consciously evolve, to open our eyes and see what is right in front of us. We are at a turning point, and the decisions made here will shape whether we walk into a future of dignity and sovereignty or of managed behavior and limited mobility. This is not an alarmism, it's reality. The time for silence has passed. We must demand transparent planning, voluntary solutions, and respect for individual rights, not systems that treat the public like a problem to be managed. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the public commenters.
Thank you very much. This is an item for discussion. Do any member have comments or questions? Yes.
Yeah, trying to understand this, I thought an example might be a great way to go. And so I have a project I'll describe that we approved a year or so, 2 years ago maybe, in Encinitas, and it kind of went through the classic process. It was under CEQA, and it had one significant thing that it could not undo, and it was, of course, VMT. Now, 20 years ago, it would have been level of service, but now with the state law, it's VMT. And in the end, we had to do a statement of overriding considerations. It was a housing element. So on one hand, we had the gun to our head from HCD. And on the other hand, we had a CEQA finding we could not mitigate. So in the end, there was no mitigation. VMT did nothing. We didn't save any miles. If this was in place, what would happen? Would we then be able to basically have them buy VMT credits basically, or exchange, so that at least would get mitigation somewhere and therefore it would be mitigable?
So it would really come down to if the jurisdiction wants to participate in the program and how much they want to participate in the program.
Assuming we are participating.
Then yes.
Any and all programs.
Right. So one of three things could happen, and that's kind of why we provided the different layers. They could purchase credits either that Encinitas or another jurisdiction had developed and held on to in the past, and they can use that to offset their mitigation. They could build CIP ready projects or shovel ready projects either within Encinitas or kind of within the rest of the region to offset their impacts. Or if the city decided to build its own VMT in lieu fee program based on the data that's provided through this, the city would already have a mechanism where the applicant would pay them, and then that would go towards VMT reducing projects within the city. So the answer is yes, assuming that the jurisdiction was participating.
So we could adopt whichever of the hybrid program subsections that would tailor to us. If we as a jurisdiction wanted to edict that all VMT mitigation be done within projects within Encinitas, we could choose to do so. That's what you're saying, I hope.
Yes, but the city would have to use the resources to build their own programs for that though, but yes.
Okay. Then the other question gets down to more, in essence, you're heading towards a market price for a 1 mile of VMT offset. Your professional opinion, you have a bound or a range of about what does it cost to offset a VMT, 1 VMT mile?
It's a difficult question because the county is so different. And that's one of the things that we're going to have to tackle when we're building the program. So, but I will give you an example. The City of San Diego Active Transportation and lieu fee program did that exact calculation, and it's about $2,000 per mile. But that's within the city that has resources like downtown San Diego, where you get a lot of bang for your buck for a bike lane just because of the population density. When we develop the study, we're going to have to look at the different regions and see how efficient that is as well. Because a bike lane costs a similar value in Poway and in Encinitas, but the effect of the bike lane, the utilization of it might be different. So while the denominator is the same, the numerator might change.
And just out of curiosity, do you have an idea of what's the utilization of bike lanes in Poway versus like downtown? Is it, if I had to guess in Encinitas, I would say 2%, 1% at most. And is it maybe 5%?
I don't know that off the top of my head, so I don't want to give a wrong answer on it. I don't have that information.
Okay, I was trying to guess whether it's instead of 2,000 down there, since the common use of bike lanes. There, we have a few, but not very many for commuting. And really, we're talking commuting, not pleasure riding, because pleasure riding is not offsetting. If I look in Encinitas or probably Poway too, I would say 90, if not 95%, maybe even 99% of all bicyclists are pleasure, especially on weekends, with the exception of students who used to walk and now they take, and then they rode bikes and now they ride. So I'm still not sure how many car trips we're offsetting. So there's a lot of math there, a lot of assumptions that we need to nail to understand. But hopefully the market would figure out what that price is worth, what the supply demand for VMT offset is, right?
Right. And to answer your question, that's the next steps of it. That's what we're going to start to look into, the math of figuring out how effective everything is. So we just selected the program types, and now we're actually going to go do the math and build the program.
And I do appreciate you giving me a ballpark number. I understand, my mileage may vary, as the old saying goes. So,
Mayor Ellis, just one thing I want to add. Stephen gave an example of an active transportation program, but you could create a VMT mitigation program that has other types of projects that reduce VMT as well. It doesn't have to be a bike lane or a bike project. It could be transit. It could be some other type of TDM program.
Well, it gets to the heart of the issue I've had is that for every mile bike lane we put in, how many real VMTs am I really offsetting in Encinitas or in North County? And I think it's minimal. I think the lever arm is just so under levered there compared to a dense city. I travel to Hong Kong and places like that. Sure, a bike lane there, you're going to have hundreds of people and hundreds of cars. Every intersection I stop at, I do a little mental exercise. I count how many bicycles I can see moving and how many cars. I can see 100 cars and I can see 1 or 2 bikes. And in my wildest dreams, we're going to get to 2 to 4 bikes. But that's still, that lever arm is not going to, I believe the number is going to end up being much, much higher than 2,000 per vehicle mile offset, truly. If we have a way that eventually we can measure the effectivity of a VMT offset, it's really behavior, people. And until you get them out of their cars for commuting or mandatory activities and onto a bike, we won't know. But my suspicion is it's probably much more than the number you even quoted. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Is there any other member of the board that had a comment or question? I'll make one comment. Thank you very much for your line of questioning. We're struggling with that in Coronado. We do have a lot of bike lanes, and we also have paid 2 different opportunities for free transit. During the summer, we pay for a free bus that goes up and down Orange Avenue, and then we tried, like many of your jurisdictions, doing the green in-village taxi thing that we did for a couple of months, and we paid for ours. There was no grants. And we were trying to get that exact question answered. If you didn't take this, what would you have done? Would you have driven your own car? Would you have biked? And although we do have some data, we had problems with collecting it. So we are not as comfortable that we truly captured those numbers. So we're struggling, but those are the kind of programs that might be able to be in a BMT offset if we figured that out. It's not just being in a bike. It could be alternative transportation such as green vehicles or something. So I do look forward to opportunity in the future as we move forward, looking at ways to try and offset that for our cities.
We've been having a lot of conversations about how we fund flexible fleets. So that could be another option, a creative way to fund flexible fleet programs like yours and other shuttle services that are struggling because the cost to operate is so high.
Oh, sure.
This gets to kind of back to what I think I talk to Antoinette about all the time is when we people take EVs, we don't get credit for them, right? In our CARB calculations.
With just SB 375. So not related to SB 743, just SB 375. We don't get credit.
Oh, okay. So maybe then you can answer, Stephen can answer. Do we differentiate between an EVT, EV VMT, or an internal combustion engine VMT? In other words, when we're offsetting, are we offsetting partially the carbon-free transportation that our citizens are adopting freely? And if so, are we taking credit for it, even though we don't get credit for it?
So it would really depend on the jurisdiction. The CEQA guidelines specifically say to use VMT, vehicle miles traveled. All. But that doesn't stop a jurisdiction from developing their own standard linking, because the substantial evidence is based on greenhouse gas reduction. It doesn't stop a jurisdiction from creating their own standard where you could separate between the two, but I'm not aware of any jurisdiction that has done that to this point.
But wouldn't we want to be a jurisdiction that would take that into account so as that we're not counting something that we're really not offsetting?
That would be up to the city of Encinitas.
Oh, I mean for the what we're proposing here.
Right. So the guidelines for the cities set their own threshold. So that would be done. That would be something that's done at the city level, not at this level. But this is something that it could take that into account if that's something the cities decide to implement.
Okay. Thank you.
And on that note, I'll tell you, we ran into the same issue in Coronado. I have 2 electric vehicles, so no matter what I do, I'm actually greener than if I take the bus right now. So we run into those, and that is the issue for us, the methodology of figuring out what it is your alternate vehicle is if it's not a privately owned gas vehicle. How do you measure that? Thank you very much for the presentation.
Sorry.
Koval has her hand up.
Probably couldn't see me.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's an online comment.
No, Laura Koval from East County.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Please.
Yes. Hi. I have a question. This is my first time hearing about this, but I do know that some of the city staff has been working with this group. Are there offsets for, I know from the East County Economic Development Council that they have the SANDAG data that says that 70% of the people that live in East County drive out for their jobs to the job centers. And what we've been trying to do for decades is create job centers in East County so people don't have a long commute. But that seems to be our biggest challenge. Would this kind of program have offsets for job centers coming to East County? Has that been discussed at the staff level or through this program? To me, it just seems like at least for our region, the easiest way to reduce vehicle mile travel is to make jobs where people live. Meaningful jobs.
Right. So this program doesn't have land use authority, so we wouldn't be able to create job centers through this program. That would still be on the jurisdictions, but what this could do is help offset some of the impacts. You know, VMT is a little bit of a chicken and the egg, because it's kind of like you have impacts until you go through the EIR process, disclose the impacts, and then you can actually have the land use densities to start to reduce VMT by creating job centers near housing. So this program could be used as kind of the mitigation for those, and it could be used as kind of an interim step as those job centers come on. But no, we don't have land use authority to implement kind of employment uses near residential.
And I was surprised to hear that, you know, if you have an electric car, that's, you know, vehicle miles traveled doesn't get some kind of credit for electric vehicles. Isn't that the whole point of vehicle miles traveled?
So it's one of the things our industry is grappling with quite a bit right now. The CEQA guidelines do specifically say vehicle miles traveled. They don't necessarily distinguish between the two. I believe the jurisdiction has the right to set their own thresholds and standards. So if a jurisdiction wanted to distinguish between the two, they could. But I haven't seen that done in practice yet.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
On that comment, one of the reasons BMT was chosen years ago as the metric they're using, it isn't just the individual vehicle, it's the fact that the more vehicles you have on the road makes other people go slower, so there's more combustion cars that are idling, or there's more air pollutants in the air. So it's kind of complicated to say what we're doing with BMT. Are we just getting rid of a specific trade-off from a gas car to an electric car, or did we change the amount of time commuting takes, which makes it even more complicated to see if we've actually decreased the greenhouse gas potential. With that, if there are no other comments from the board, thank you very much to the presenters. Thank you very much. We look forward to what you come back with after you've got plans. Thank you. Next up is item 4. Stacy Cooper will present an overview of SANDAG's role in housing. She's gone. Where is she? There she is.
While Stacy's getting settled in, I mentioned in the agency update SB 375 reform. So all of these topics that you are talking about right now around GHG versus VMT and getting credit for EVs is part of that conversation. So we're advocating really heavily and working closely with other MPOs on this topic, and we'll keep you all apprised.
All right. Good afternoon, committee members. Stacy Cooper, Senior Planner on the Sustainable Communities team. So as you know, SANDAG has several federal and state designations that form the framework for the work that we do as an agency. Today, we're going to focus on why SANDAG is involved in housing. Our designations as a regional transportation planning agency, Regional Transportation Commission, Council of Governments, and Metropolitan Planning Organization provide us with specific yet limited responsibilities in housing. As part of the regional plan, SANDAG is responsible for developing a compliant sustainable community strategy, or SCS, that includes a coordinated transportation network and land use pattern. As a Regional Transportation Commission, we distribute Smart Growth Incentive Program funding to local jurisdictions that incentivize projects in smart growth areas identified in the SCS. As a Council of Governments, or COG, we're responsible for developing the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or RHNA process. And in 2019, Assembly Bill 101 expanded SANDAG's role in housing by establishing the Regional Early Action Planning Grant Program, or REAP, and provided MPOs with planning dollars. With these funds, we launched our Housing Acceleration Program, or HAP. So first, everyone's favorite topic. So what is RHNA? Since 1969, the state of California has required that all local governments adequately plan to meet projected and existing housing needs at a variety of affordability levels in each jurisdiction. It's not a prediction of housing, it's not a cap on demand or production, and it's not limited due to existing land use. So how does the RHNA process work? The agency in charge of the RHNA process is the California Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD. And approximately every 8 years, HCD, in consultation with the Department of Finance and the Council of Governments, determines each region's housing need at a variety of affordability levels. SANDAG, or the other COG, then develops a RENA methodology to distribute those units to each city. Then the local governments update their housing elements to show how they will accommodate RENA and meet their local housing needs. So while we get to develop the methodology of RENA, it must fulfill the 5 statutory objectives, which include increasing housing supply and mix, promoting infill, protecting natural resources, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, creating a jobs housing balance, and advancing equity and affirmatively furthering fair housing. So as I mentioned, we get to create the methodology, but it also has to be reviewed by HCD. So as I mentioned, AB 101, the bill that established the REAP program, also directed HCD to develop recommendations related to the RENA process and methodology that promote and streamline housing development. In April of last year, HCD released the report, California Housing Future 2040, the next RENA. The report is structured into 3 different sections and includes 10 specific recommendations to the legislature. And these are things that we have to change in state code in order to move forward. 3 policy considerations, but they didn't provide very much detail. It was just things that we should continue to look at and keep talking about. And then 9 plan administrative changes. And these are things that HCD currently has the authority to do, so we can expect to see those in the 7th cycle, and we're monitoring those closely to see how those will impact our region. So last year, we brought an overview of the report to the Sustainable Communities Working Group, here to the Regional Planning Committee, and to Executive Committee, which resulted in a letter to the chairs of the Senate and Assembly Housing Committees outlining legislative principles. And that's included in your packet as attachment 1. So last year, after the report was published, Sacramento started moving fast. One of the recommendations that was included in the report was to account for people experiencing homelessness. So shortly after that, Ward authored a bill that passed that created 2 new income categories in RENA. So it's acutely low and extremely low income, sort of further complicating the RENA process. And then this year, there were 160 housing bills that were introduced and a number of spot bills. We're monitoring those closely just to see what's making it through and working with our executive committee on advocacy. So as we know, whereas RENA used to just be a planning exercise, in the past few years, the HCD has started to hold jurisdictions more accountable. So the Housing Accountability Act includes Builder's Remedy, which allows developers to bypass local zoning and planning rules when a city doesn't have a compliant housing element. But currently, all the jurisdictions in our region do have a compliant housing element. Then there was SB 35, which was updated and amended by SB 423, which allows home builders to pursue a streamlined approval process in cities that have fallen behind on their RENA production targets. And then HCD is also the agency responsible for enforcing state law. And over the past few years, they've grown their accountability efforts and formed a housing accountability unit, which is responsible for holding jurisdictions accountable for meeting their housing element commitments and complying with state housing laws. So we have been working with the executive committee to do some advocacy around RENA. That's one of the around RENA reform and housing, which is one of their legislative principles for this year. So as I mentioned, we sent the letter up to Sacramento, and it's been used in follow-up conversations with the chair and chairs of the housing committee, HCD, and the governor's office. We have been working also on bills that could have impacted SANDAG in the 7th cycle. For example, SB 233, which would start consultation earlier. SANDAG was excluded from that bill due to misinformation that was at the state level. And then we've also been working with advocates and coordinating efforts on legislative initiatives. We're continuing to work with the state on SB 35/423 impacts. And then last year, were able to successfully advocate to restore REAP 2.0 funding, and we're currently hoping to get an extension deadline and also get future REAP funding in the future. So on to our, so as I mentioned, AB 101 established the REAP program and expanded SANDAG's role in housing. So we received $6.8 million in funding from REAP 1.0, and we launched our Housing Acceleration Program to help facilitate compliance in implementing the 6th cycle RENA. In 2022, we received $40.5 million in REAP 2.0 funding to continue and expand the program. So based on feedback from the local jurisdictions, SANDAG developed a program that comprised of 3 core strategies: local jurisdiction support, So that's technical resources and financial assistance to the cities, data analysis and policy tools, so resources and best practices for local jurisdictions, stakeholders and communities, and regional initiatives. So this included educational, leadership, and funding opportunities to accelerate housing investments. So the REAP 2.0 program built on the success of REAP 1.0 and expanded the program focus by addressing the state's housing and climate goals. The three objectives of REAP 2.0 are accelerating infill development that facilitates supply, choice, and affordability, affirmatively furthering fair housing, and reducing VMT. So we did a lot of community outreach when we first got our REAP 2.0 funding to put together our program, and we developed 4 program priorities. The first is local jurisdiction support. We have awarded $12.3 million to the local jurisdictions for both capital and planning projects. We have a technical assistance program that provides assistance to the jurisdictions as they comply with all the new housing laws and implementing their six cycle housing elements. And our housing policy and planning tool is another one of these resources that allows users to analyze data sets and policy documents related to housing. And we're going to continue to update that as new data becomes available. We have affordable housing programs. So SANDAG partnered with the San Diego Foundation, and we're implementing a regional housing trust fund for $15 million. And we also work with different stakeholders around the region on statewide grant coordination, like for ASIC. Transit agency partnership, we're coordinating with MTS and NCTD to advance transit-oriented development. And as Antoinette mentioned, we provided $4.4 million to the SCTCA for a tribal housing program. And then next steps, so we'll continue to monitor housing legislation and RENA efforts, advocate for the continuation of REAP funding, continue to provide technical assistance to local jurisdictions, continue to advocate on behalf of the board related to housing priorities and bring updates to both RPC and sustainable communities, and prepare to begin consultation with HCD for the 7th cycle in late 2027. And that concludes my presentation. Open for any questions.
Francesca, do we have any public comments?
Thank you, Chair. We do have public comment. We have 5 total, it looks like. We'll start again with Jeff Huter. And then after Jeff will be Cesar Javier.
So I just want to hit on a couple of things here. You probably don't think about it, but the single biggest impact that SANDAG has on housing is just its transit plans, because under the city of San Diego, 70% of all housing development is based on TPA or SDA-based incentives. Somewhere around 1.6 million units are possible just because of those transit-based incentives. So every time you take a transit stop away or add one in, even if you think it's speculative, you're actually making a land use decision for the city of San Diego. The state is trying to put this into the rest of it, of the city through the SB 79. And so, is that my time?
No, you still have a little over a minute.
Okay. And so the other part I wanted to hit on is the REAP grants. I appreciate the remark of Council Member Kovacs. You keep putting housing in the REAP grants, but there's nothing to go with that housing. There's no jobs, there's no economic development. There's not a reason for people to actually live in the communities where that housing is done. And so it would be much better if you had a more socially balanced and effective strategy for creating those. What we find here in Mid-City is everybody, just like in East County, commutes out to work. And what we're finding is people are actually moving out because the opportunities don't exist. One of the things you don't do in the REAP grants is you don't specify the type of housing. So instead of getting family-sized units, which is the biggest need we have to retain people in San Diego, what we get are a bunch of 400 square foot studios because they get to avoid fees and other restrictions. And so we'd really like you to reconsider how you think about what
you,
those
Jeff. Your
REAP
time
grants are
has
supposed to
expired
produce.
now.
Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Cesar Javier, followed by allegedly Audra.
Cesar Javier. Thank you, SANDAG. This typical presentation conceptually is describing our governance weakness. We do not know what is priority. We do not know which direction we are trying to reach, if only to ensure that San Diegans will survive for the next decades and decades. I must tell you that basically, look around. We have this physical shelter amidst emptiness. Look around. For example, that 101 Ash property, it's been there many years when this new administration of the city came about. We have huge real estate. What was the priority? Oh, we build this stadium. Oh, we build this Petco Park. Oh, we build this I think we are missing something. The moral path. Let us prioritize on man. Let's keep them healthy and ready for a job. So therefore we have to invest in health, education, infrastructure while we build economic, quality, decent roof. Let's build something like what the Komiai survived with their mighty tent. Can we not do that? Can we not think of something else while waiting for the... It will never happen because why? We are exploding in population, and therefore we have to hurry up for the sake of those sick and dying. Who would be the platform of building and building and building? Thank you,
very
SANDAG.
much. Our next speaker will be allegedly Audra, followed by Truth.
More propaganda, you guys. There's plenty of buildings here in the city that are just totally vacant, but whatever. I mean, it's like you guys just, and I love when people expose themselves. Thank you for just letting us know it's behaviors and people that need to change in order to get us out of our cars so you guys can enslave us. And you're basically impeding your ability to create housing when you're like, we need people to be able to work there as well as live there. What if they don't want to work there? What if you're not providing the job that they would like? What if there's so many what ifs, and it's like you guys literally think that you can control everything that people do, and that, you know, as long as you, I mean, because if you really wanted to provide housing, you're never going to get the 68,959 units that need to be built in this region. Because you work at a snail's pace, you literally get in your own way. You're pretending that vehicle miles traveled is going to like be something that you can mitigate when you know you can't. You just proved it talking about it here. It's all a bunch of BS. But yet you're still going to do it. And if you really cared about providing homes for people, you would do it no matter what. That would be your top priority. But instead, you're like, we need to mitigate this and we need to mitigate that. And so we're going to create this program and we're going to have these people collect some data here. And then the needle just keeps getting pushed back further and further every time you guys do that. So it's just sad because this is a racket too, because anytime you're saying affordable housing, it's like they only have to provide maybe a couple of units that are deed restricted, but all those people have to do is not rent those out, but get that building built because they're following the rules that you guys want them to follow. And then they just break up the price on the other units that make up for those couple of units that they're not really going to rent out. I mean, it's crazy what a racket it is and how many people are homeless on the streets and nobody gives a damn. Because everything that you're doing is literally impeding your ability to provide what you're sitting here pretending saying that you want to provide.
I think your next speaker will be Truth, who will be followed by Consuelo.
You know, RENA is a great example of something that was voluntary until it wasn't anymore, huh? I'm almost to the point of saying that certain reps should just stop fighting the RENA housing quotas and just keep incentivizing corporate stack and pack developers to squeeze every last genuinely affordable housing option out of the state in order to force the last holdouts to move out of California. That way the state can lose so many tax dollars it crumbles under the weight of its own evil policies. Until the criminals are out of office, such as Newscomb and Weiner, nothing is going to get better. Until every city and every county starts saying no to the unlawful mandates, nothing's going to change. They will keep writing bills that say nobody's got local control. Nobody has the constitutional right to self-determination. If that's true, then why are there city councils? Anyone at the state level having jurisdiction over a local city is as real as a paper dollar. It's whatever you want to believe. And exchanging RENA numbers is no different than exchanging VMT numbers. It's a scam. At the May 9th BOD meeting, that unconcise guy from the League of Cal Cities was a waste of time. He had no answer other than comply and die. His useless presentation should have been cut short. Whatever city has sense, pull yourselves from the league now. They're part of the problem. This dystopia of taxpayer-funded government projects everywhere is not the future. It is the past. It already happened in every communist country. The Soviet Union ended up with a bunch of empty Potemkins, facades. This is all a facade of a housing crisis when we actually have a political crisis, a political monopoly, an insurance crisis, an overregulation crisis, and a bad policy disaster by those who refuse to face the realities that they are the problem. And there's no amount of ADUs towering over people's backyards that are going to cover it up anymore. And isn't that a really fun note to think about? But I'm going to give you guys my highlights of the day. That lost conversation, also a scam, as I said. The best part was we throw stuff at the wall, and we're not sure if it's the chicken and the egg. It's like, listen to that science that goes behind the decisions that are made at SANDAG and coming from the state, filtering down like sewage the other direction. Thank you.
I think our next speaker will be Consuelo, followed by Paul the Bold.
Okay, Consuelo here. So yeah, let's talk about what this is really about beneath the surface. On paper, this sounds good. Faster development, more housing, problem solved. But we must ask who this is really for and at what cost. Because when you dig into the details, you see this isn't about affordability or community. It's about centralized planning, high density mandates, and control over how and where we live. This isn't local, it's global, aligning step by step with the UN Agenda 21 and 2030 goals that aim to recognize society into compact, surveilled, controlled zones under the name of sustainability. What they call acceleration is often code for bypassing public input and fast-tracking developments that reshape communities without consent. Once you're packed into a dense zone with limited transit options, digital surveillance, and a shrinking footprint of personal space, it's very hard to walk that back. We need to wake up. This is not just about housing. This is about a new model of living being quietly ushered in. A model where the average person has less space, less voice, and less freedom, while being told it's all about the greater good. We must consciously evolve and start seeing these policies for what they are. The glossy language and the PR campaigns are designed to lull us all to sleep while the foundations are laid for a very different society, one based on compliance, not liberty. Real solutions empower communities. They don't compress them. They respect choice, local voices, and the unique character of each region. We don't need acceleration. We need awakening. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Paul the Bold, followed by Marco Espinoza, and Marco will be our final speaker.
Hi, Paul the Bold. Let's get back to basics, and that was a great speech, Consuelo. So the presentation says that SANDAG's functions are a regional transportation plan, plan and build transportation, Transnet, RGIS, the Justice Database, and finally RHNA, which they call an assessment. That last one is the only mention of housing. The presenter mentioned a limited role. Limited. SANDAG also uses 8-year-old data, which I don't like. Slide 2, however, says assessment is authorized. Assessment. Slide 4, it changes to allocation. I don't know who did this, but is it a lie or distortion? Let's see, advocacy in Sacramento is not part of the basic mission. SANDAG should not be providing housing. Allocating housing to places depending on income is pretty discriminatory. And they shouldn't be handling housing money either. In fact, SANDAG is pretty bad at handling money in general. And I don't know about furthering fair housing. Nothing SANDAG does seems to be really fair either. Certainly not logical.
Thank you. Our final speaker will be Marco Espinoza. You can go ahead.
Hello, afternoon, Marco Espinoza. Something I notice when referring to housing and public transit, most people will reference how far away it is or whatnot. Per that public transit option, I just wanted to remind folks or put more emphasis on it can't just be a little MTS sign on a 12-foot pole and you stand next to it. You need somewhere to sit. And sometimes even when there is somewhere to sit, you need shade. And those aren't everywhere. That style of transit stop isn't everywhere. And I get it. There's a lot of infrastructure, redesign the road, whatnot. But only having just that 12-foot pole, I would say, isn't good enough. There definitely needs to be more there for the user. Because the other option is you get a car comes with all the plush amenities and whatnot versus standing outside. Who wants to stand outside? You don't want to have your kids there. You don't want to have groceries being, so close to fast moving vehicle. It is an entirely different way of thinking that essentially in this country we don't naturally have because we didn't grow up with it. Decade after decade, public transportation has been removed from this country in order to help benefit certain industries, as we know. So it is difficult upon each of us to change that mindset in developing plans. But that was just one thing I really wanted to put out there, that it can't just be a single 12-foot pole.
Thank you. That concludes the public comments.
Are there any committee members that have a public comment or question at this time? Yes, Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep it simple since I think appreciate the update here and just a better understanding of some of the programs that SANDAG is offering. Obviously, at the retreat, we had a pretty good discussion around RENA in particular. But one thing that just sort of caught my attention on the slides was the mention of the partnership with the San Diego Foundation for the implementation of the Housing Trust Fund. And so I was actually curious about that, if that's related to or separate of the Housing Impact Fund that the foundation had announced several years ago.
So it's not part of the Housing Impact Fund. Initially, I think there was discussion about when they were launching their funds and us getting the REAP dollars of actually doing something a little bit more jointly with those monies. And then what happened was last year with the REAP 2.0 budget being on the chopping block, we weren't able to move forward and they launched their program. So we've since then established sort of a separate program because the REAP 2.0 dollars need to fulfill those three REAP objectives, whereas they're funding a lot of it's philanthropic, so they don't necessarily need to do that. So they're sort of side by side. And so we've contributed the $15 million. Applications have been evaluated. They've gone through some interviews, and we're hoping to be able to announce winners later this month.
Understood. Thank you. That's helpful to understand. And this is one of the areas in particular that I've thought is of significant interest, is the financing side of housing is extremely challenging, probably more so than ever.
Just a note, which I didn't mention. So the funding is going out as both grants and loans. So the loans will have to be repaid back, obviously keeping that money in our region for years to come.
Great. I'm sure we'll have more of these conversations moving forward. Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, Mr. Ills.
So one of the questions I have is, RENA, is it working? And I just pulled up the SANDAG RENA progress dashboard, and it basically shows, I could flip it around here, but it's probably too small. I think you know what it shows. It shows that the progress is at a fraction, a small fraction, a fifth to a tenth of what the RENA goal is. And that's consistent across the state. So my conclusion is no, RENA as a function to get lower income housing is not working. Truth, I think you hit on something. I was on Planning Commission 23 years ago, and it was a suggestion. It was, you don't have to build it. What the planners would tell us all is you don't have to build it, you have to zone for the capacity. And over the last 25 years, what we've seen is we now have enforcement. We're being, literally have a builder's remedy, a gun to our head that we have to build it. At what point does it cross the threshold of being an unfunded mandate and contrary to the Constitution? I think that's one of the arguments we ought to take up as a regional organization, to go to Sacramento and our legislature and say, this has become an unfunded mandate. So now let's talk about how big of an unfunded mandate. And in the letter, November 2024 letter that SANDAG, before I got here, sent, we used the number, the subsidy, not the cost of the actual house, but the incremental amount of funding needed, $700,000 per unit. So first question I'll ask, how much money in the REAP grants this year?
How much money was SANDAG allocated? We were given $40.5 million.
$40.5 million. I'll be kind. That would subsidize 80 housing units, right? Less actually, but just so if we put that directly into housing, because that's really what it's about. What's happening is the state is not funding that which they are mandating, and we need to change that. If you do the math and take the 700, by the way, the new law coming up that'll add more acutely low and extremely low, that's only going to raise that 700,000 higher because there's more subsidy required, but we'll go with the 700,000 for now. The 68,000 low and very low we have to provide times 700,000 per unit, $47 billion with a B billion dollars over 8 years. So that's about $6 billion per year. The state is not funding to San Diego County, but they're expecting us to do it. And the only way it happens is the builders have to build 6 times as many, roughly 6 times as many above moderate houses. So I'll just close with my statement, my rhetorical statement I always make. How many more $1 million condos do I have to build in San Diego County to solve affordability? We're building the wrong thing. And I'll just keep saying it until Sacramento hears. Thank you.
Did anybody else wish to make a comment? Well, thank you all for staying. I realize it's been a long day for some of us, so thank you for being here, and thank you for the presentation. I don't think it gets old reminding everybody out there that we are stuck with the situation the way that it is, and we're trying to find ways to help us all get through it when it comes around next time. So thank you to Daniel and the production team, and Francesca for the meeting support. We greatly appreciate it, and the fast move around between our meeting that was in here at our start time and getting us set up for this one. So thank you all for your flexibility. The next regular meeting of the Regional Planning Committee is scheduled for Friday, July 18th at 1 p.m. We are adjourned.